Have you ever heard the expression, truth is stranger than fiction? Well, today we're diving into a story that is so bizarre, so utterly mind-boggling that if you didn't know better, you would think it was a plot straight out of a psychological thriller. Twin sisters, folle et deux, shared madness or madness of two, a state of shared psychosis, if you will. There's a motorway accident that defies all logic, and to top it all off, a murder. Today, we're talking about Sabina and Ursula Eriksson. Just a warning, if you are watching this through YouTube, we do show disturbing footage, and this video also talks about self-harm, so viewer discretion is advised. Two women, seemingly normal, but what unfolds over the course of 48 hours in May of 2008 would leave the world questioning about the human mind and just how much we don't know about it. Let's start at the beginning. Well, as much of the beginning as we can piece together. Sabina and Ursula Eriksson, they're identical twins, born in the town of Sunne, Sweden in 1967. They had an older brother and an older sister. Growing up, they did not have any criminal history. They weren't troubled. There was no history of mental illness, at least not anything officially recorded. They had relatively normal lives. There was no warning, no signs of what was to come next. By 2008, Ursula is living in the United States, and Sabina lives in Ireland with her partner and two children. It's reported that she worked as a hairdresser in Ireland, and according to the Irish Independent, it states, a very quiet woman who was best known for her penchant for Irish fashion and was a familiar face in local shops. Even though they're separated by continents, both lives seemed stable. But then, in May of that year, Ursula flies to Ireland to visit Sabina, and just hours after their arrival, the two sisters vanish. No explanations, no goodbyes, they're just gone. Friday, May 16th, 2008, Ursula boards a plane to County Cork, where Sabina was living in southwest Ireland. Within 24 hours of Ursula's plane landing, they just take off. Sabina doesn't say anything to her husband. They travel by ferry from Ireland to Liverpool, arriving around 8:30 a.m. What's weird is they weren't able to trace any friends or family ties to Liverpool, so it's really just a mystery as to why they went there or what their original plane even was. The very first stop after boarding is Sant Ann Police Station. Sabina runs in frantically. She's claiming her partner's abusive and her children are in danger. Let me remind you, Sabina's the one who lives in Ireland, did not have any contact with her family before she leaves. The police in Liverpool contact the police in Ireland. The Irish police go to Sabina's home. They talk to the husband and he's like, I have no idea what's going on. We had a little bit of an argument last night, but when I woke up, they were just gone. According to the Irish police, everything checks out normal. Next stop, around 11:30 a.m., Sabina and Ursula board a National Express coach, traveling from Liverpool to London. But things start to take a turn when the twins start acting erratically, making the driver and other riders concerned. And they make the driver so concerned, he stops the bus. And they wouldn't originally check their baggage into what they call a coach, like the storage area. And they're acting strange the whole time during the ride, and they have their bags like up to their chest. And the bus driver, he stops the bus and he says, can I check your bags? They tell him no. And he says, get off this bus. So they don't even make it all the way to London. The service station that they end up stopping at is Stoke-on-Trent. And the driver tells the service manager, "This is above my pay grade. You can deal with it." The service manager revealed that Ursula and Sabina, they were still just clutching their bags to their chest. Like everything they owned are in these bags. They're not going to let them go. The sisters are just kind of wandering around, and the manager said that it looks like they're plotting. So at this point, they're thinking there's explosive devices or drugs in the bag. Sabina and Ursula become aware that the manager is watching them. So she calls the police. Police come, they have a conversation, and ultimately the police decide that there's nothing abnormal going on and they're allowed to go. Whether or not they were acting sane when they talked to the police is questionable. Footage from the highway camera shows the sisters walking down the middle of the M6. This is Britain's busiest and longest highway. It connects to Scotland. So there's 3 lanes on each side, and in the middle there's these metal barriers and there's concrete, and they're just walking in between. They seem so oblivious to the traffic, like maybe they're in some kind of trance. But there's officers monitoring the CCTV, and they decide to dispatch officers to basically assist them to safety. But before the officers arrive, they get word that a woman has been struck in lane 3. Sabina would be the sister that jumps the barrier into oncoming traffic. The officers also happen to have a camera crew because they're filming for a BBC series, Motorway Cops. Anyways, the officers are expecting to arrive to a casualty. A woman was just hit by a car going almost 70 miles per hour. So in this footage, you can see Sabina and Ursula. They're on the shoulder. They're just talking to the officers. One of the officers comes up to brief the 2 that just arrived with the camera crew. And in the background, you can see the sisters still calmly talking to one officer. And then out of nowhere, Ursula just hauls ass straight into oncoming traffic. The officer tries to grab her, and she just slips out of her jacket, running into an 18-wheeler semi traveling at least 55 miles per hour. You can see in the video that she dives for the wheels, and she gets entangled in it, and it obviously runs over her, and she's getting dragged a little bit. And then you just see her lying in the road. Her upper body looks normal. Her legs are described as an explosion. She has bones protruding, and essentially her legs are boneless. As you can imagine, she has massive leg injuries. Not too long after, Sabina runs into traffic and gets hit by a car. Her body hits the windshield, and she just gets thrown into the air. It's explained it just looks like a rag doll just flying. But here's the insane part. They survived, and they were not done yet. Ursula is lying immobile on the road with broken bones. She's still conscious. Somehow, it's miraculous, honestly. But she's screaming at the police. She's spitting, calling them assholes, telling them to get away from her. She's just being so aggressive. Meanwhile, Sabina had just been unconscious for 15 minutes, and when she regains consciousness, at first, she's calm. Everything's okay. We're gonna help you. And Ursula yells, "Be careful! They're gonna take your organs!" Sabina immediately jumps to her feet, seemingly unhurt, and she makes a run for the other side of the highway. So the police obviously try to stop her from doing that by grabbing and restraining her. She turns around and just straight up punches this officer in the face, knocks the officer down, and this gives her the opportunity to just make a run for it. The police are jumping over the barrier, trying to get to her, just telling her to calm down, and she takes her jacket off and starts squaring up with the officer like she wants to fight. The police make a statement saying that she has inhuman strength. Then finally, it takes 6 people to restrain her. They have her hands behind her back, Her legs are restrained. Her feet are restrained. Even though she's restrained, she's still yelling profanities and saying, "Call the police." And the officers are like, "We are the police." And she is just fighting them every step of the way. Which, let me remind you, she was just hit twice by cars going at least 55 to 70 miles per hour. The paramedics arrive and they end up sedating her so that she can be transported. Meanwhile, while all of this is going on, the air ambulance comes and gets Ursula and transports her to a hospital where she actually has to stay until September because her injuries are so severe. At this point, the officers and everyone's thinking the same thing. Drugs. Surely these women are on something, right? Like, typically the superhuman strength comes from a substance. And while the sisters are being transported to the hospital, the officers decide to go through their bags. There are multiple phones and only one ID for one sister. There's no documentation showing their addresses, where they lived, or who to contact. Which is odd because they were just clutching their bags not too long ago, acting as if everything they owned was in them. But would you believe that the toxicology reports later show that there's no traces of alcohol, drugs, any other substances? Nothing that could explain their bizarre behavior. Sabina, however, was released just 5 hours after observation. When she's being released, the police are outside the hospital waiting. Police are more than prepared for her to fight, but now she's not even acting like the same person. The officers are transporting her to be processed for custody. She's completely calm. She doesn't even have to be handcuffed. While being processed, the officer said that it seems like she didn't remember, or maybe she just didn't care because she was just acting more lucid. And she also never even asked about her sister. You can see in the clip that Sabina and the officer are having a conversation like nothing ever happened. Sabina was charged for assaulting officers and trespassing a highway. Ursula remained in the hospital and was not charged. Sabina was sentenced to 1 day in custody, which she had served because she had spent a full night in custody. But after she's released from police custody, Sabina continues her journey alone. On May 19th, 2008, just 1 day after Sabina is released, she's wandering the streets of Stoke-on-Trent trying to locate her sister. She's wearing Ursula's green jacket and carrying her items in one of those clear bags that you get from the hospital. And at 7 p.m., 2 local men spot Sabina while walking their dog on Christchurch Street. One of the men, Glenn Hollinshead, who was a former RAF airman, and the other is Glenn's friend, Peter Malloy. Sabina sticks out like a sore thumb. She appears distressed, disoriented, and she's also carrying a clear bag. That's not normal. And she yells out to them, That's a nice dog you got there." And Glenn starts a conversation with Sabina. She tells him that she needs to find her sister. She's trying to find a bed and breakfast. So Glenn, being the good Samaritan that he is, he invites her back to his house, gives her food, and provides a place to stay for the night. Peter says that she opened up and her personality was a lot more bubbly and friendly. But as they're walking to Glenn's house, Peter is carrying her bag of items and notices 2 cell phones, a $1,500 laptop, and just a few cigarettes. And he's wondering, who is this lady? Has she been kicked out? Did she just leave the hospital? Did she break in somewhere? Like, are these her items? And once Peter starts asking Sabina, what happened to your sister, she gets super defensive. For the most part, she would have a warm and bubbly personality, but once it got quiet, her personality had just a slight change. She would start getting paranoid, looking out the windows and then snapping the blinds back. Peter's getting worried, and Glenn just keeps reassuring him, "It's okay. I promise you, it's fine. We'll get her sent on her way tomorrow. It's okay." She's just behaving so odd. Like, she's like, "Do you want a cigarette?" And Peter and Glenn are like, yeah, sure. And they put it in, and as soon as they're about to light it, she snatches them from her mouth. And she's like, you can't have them. What if they're poisoned? And they're like, you've been smoking from this pack all night. So Peter's just freaked out. He wants to get the hell out and go home. And he just leaves as quickly and calmly as possible. He decides, hey, it's getting late. I'm going to go home. Like, he's just had it. He clearly doesn't have a good feeling about her at all. Glenn just kind of dismisses her behavior as she's just a little odd. She's just quirky, you know? The next day, around lunchtime, Glenn is calling his brother, who works at a local hospital, to see if he can help locate Ursula. Paul, Glenn's brother, can hear Ursula in the background, and she sounds calm and normal. She's just explaining her sister had been in an accident on the M6 the day before. Glenn goes outside to ask his neighbor for some tea bags, and his neighbor just says, oh, I'll go get some and bring them back to you. Before the neighbor leaves, it's not even 72 seconds later, Glenn manages to stagger outside and tell his neighbor, she stabbed me. And the neighbor sees the blood and he calls the police. As he's calling, Glenn's final words were, look after my dog. And his neighbor says, of course I'll look after her, no problem. Sabina, for reasons unknown, stabbed Glenn multiple times with a kitchen knife and fled the scene. It's also said that she stabbed him in the heart. And just like that, the woman who caused so much chaos on the motorway is now a murderer. After she kills Glenn, Sabina flees. She's running through the streets with a hammer. This is also on CCTV. And a passing motorist sees that her hair is so matted from blood because she had just been repeatedly hitting herself in the head with a hammer. This guy just gets out of his car and he has tunnel vision. Just get the hammer away from her. So they're wrestling around a little bit, and the whole time she's like making these awful grunting sounds. And he gets the hammer and walks away, and he gets hit in the back of the head. He thinks it was just her fist, but the cops later tell him it's a roof tile that she had in her pocket. So now there's two paramedics chasing her on foot. Eventually, she gets on this bridge at Heron Cross, and it goes over the A50. It's not a highway, but it's a busy road. And I know what you're thinking. No, she doesn't. But yes, she does. Eventually, Sabina jumps onto the A50. She somehow still survives. She only has two broken ankles and a fractured skull. Finally, Sabina would be arrested. Whenever Sabina was questioned by authorities or whoever, all she would say is no comment. She never took full accountability. But that could be because if she's in a state of psychosis, like, she may not have much memory of what just happened. Sabina was charged with manslaughter due to diminished responsibility. She was assessed by two different psychiatrists, one for prosecution and one for the defense. Both psychiatrists would deem her as mentally ill at the time of the murder. However, there's two different diagnoses. So the defense diagnosed her with a rare condition known as folie-à-deux, shared psychosis. This condition occurs when the delusion or psychotic behavior is transmitted from one individual to another. So basically, you become infected with another person's beliefs. But it really only happens when you have like an intimate relationship. Not like romantically intimate, but like you're very close with them. So since they're identical twins, they would have this similar genetic predisposition for psychological illnesses. Prosecution would diagnose her with acute polymorphic psychotic disorder. The French nickname translates to a puff of madness. So it's where a person abruptly becomes ill, and it lasts usually for like 2 to 3 weeks and goes away, but then it comes back. Both diagnoses are actually very rare. Sabina pleaded guilty, but the court accepted that she had been under the influence of a mental disorder, which made her actions unpredictable and uncontrollable. By the end of the court case, both psychiatrists agreed that she was mentally ill at the time of the murder. But by the end of the court case, she had made a full recovery. The judge wanted to send Sabina to a mental hospital, but since she was no longer mentally ill, he couldn't. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison. 5 years for the murder of an innocent man. But since she was no longer deemed a risk to the public, he felt that it was fair. A lot of people feel the police not only let the sisters down by not getting them help, but also the community as well. When the sisters were in custody after the highway incident, Sabina was seen by a psychiatrist. But remember, before she was taken to the hospital, she was sedated. The medicine doesn't get rid of the illness, but it takes the edge off, which is probably why she seemed relatively normal at the time. However, Ursula was not even assessed at all while she was in the hospital. The problem is, you only have one side to the story. It was thought if it was full ado that Ursula was the initial psychosis instigator and Sabina was just the secondary sufferer. And at the time of the murder, Sabina probably still had Ursula in her mind, which makes sense if you think about it, because Glenn's friend, Peter, said that she was warm and bubbly until he'd asked about Ursula, and then she would just get defensive. So maybe Ursula just triggered it in general. After Ursula recovered from her injuries, she went back to the U.S. There are 1 or 2 photos of her where she attends the Sacred Heart Church in Washington. Sabina would only have to serve 2.5 years before she was released in 2011, and it's rumored that she went back to Ireland. So many questions remain. What caused Sabina and Ursula to spiral into shared psychosis? There's no clear signs of mental illness, no history of drug use. So how did they go to seemingly normal lives to causing absolute chaos? Well, we think ordinary lives. The truth is, no one really knows anything about the sisters. It's odd. No friends, no neighbors, no family members or anybody would come out of the woodwork to talk about them. Usually you see like a neighbor on the news who would have been like, yeah, I knew her. She was so nice. I never would have expected this. There's not really any photos or videos of them on the internet except for those chaotic days in the UK. Even then, the news coverage was very minimal. And also, when I was conducting my own research, it seems like there's a lot of people in general who want to protect them, which I understand. They probably went into hiding in hopes that they can forget about what happened, and they just probably want to disappear, which is exactly what they did. But how many people do you know that don't have much of a digital footprint? There's no update on them as of today. And it actually drives me a little bit crazy. Like, I don't want to be all up in people's business, but I do. I'm a nosy person. And I couldn't find anything. I was stalking all kinds of websites in Ireland and in Washington, trying to look at the church. Like, oh, was maybe Ursula in the background of a photo? Absolutely nothing. I got nowhere with that. I spent so many hours on it. It's not even funny. So now I want to talk about theories. Some people theorize that maybe they were part of human experiments such as MK Ultra. The program was a CIA project that apparently aimed to develop mind control techniques for use in interrogation and espionage, and involved experiments on subjects using like LSD, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and explore methods of altering human behavior. Like they were just trying to create superhumans. The second theory is that their organs were going to be harvested, mainly due to Ursula yelling, "Be careful, they're going to take your organs." I will say that organ trafficking is on the rise, and about 5 to 10% of people who receive transplants are organs from the black market. But I really don't think that this explains any other part of their behavior. Maybe they were just aware of organ trafficking at that time, and it just came out when they were in the state of psychosis. And it's actually time to get your tinfoil hats out for this one. Twin alien hybrids. Ursula being hit by a semi-truck, Sabina being hit multiple times by a vehicle on the highway, hammering herself in the head, jumping off a bridge, murder, all incidents that would become fatal. for most people. It's not just the incidents, but it's also the fact they had the momentum to just keep fighting. It's all very unnatural. We will never have an answer, unfortunately. I think the fact that there are so many unanswered questions only leads people to believe any other idea. Whatever the explanation, the case of Sabina and Ursula Eriksson remains one of the most baffling and terrifying stories of our time. And what makes the story so insane is the randomness of it all. Glenn's Hollenhead was just trying to help someone in need, and he paid for it with his life. It's a reminder that we never truly know the people that we encounter. We don't know what they've been through, and we don't know what they're capable of. And thank you for joining me on this deep dive into Sabina and Ursula Eriksson. This story left you with questions. You're not alone. There are still so many unanswered mysteries surrounding the twins. Perhaps that's what makes this case so intriguing. If you liked today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend who loves true crime just as much as you do. And as always, stay safe because you never know who might be out there. And I want to keep talking about this case. Please comment below. What are your thoughts? What are your theories? Do you have any information? Somebody's got to know somebody to give us more.